have a problem. Or rather, I had a problem, and my solution to said problem wasn't the best. My problem was that I had at one point finished watching an anime and I loved it so much that I decided to dig into the anime source material, only to find that said source material had not been 100% fully translated, and the roadblock caused by a lack of content would not be resolved for me immediately. I would have to wait for translations. But even if the light novel from which the anime was based was not available freely, it just so happened that the series started as a web novel, and that is freely and publicly available. If only I could read Japanese. I wanted to talk about this mostly because I believe in the high likelihood of someone being in a similar situation. We talk a lot on this channel about the increasing number of anime over the last several years, but also there is a massive amount of web novels, light novels, and manga that exist, and I honestly do not believe for 1 second that we English speakers will ever have access to everything. That seems impossible at this juncture. Official translations are great, but they are a gradual process and are usually prompted by popularity, among other things. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of Japanese stories freely available for the Japanese public that might never get translated for us here in the West. And the story that I want to tell today is not from all that long ago. After I decided to be fully caught up with the light novel translations, I found myself in a situation of just having read a cliffhanger and succumbed to the question of how I could possibly quench my thirst for more of this story and not, wait the currently estimated year for it all to come out. Today I want to tell that story, to explain my thought process and my experience going from an anime watcher to a light novel reader to a web novel translator, so that you may decide for yourself if it is something that you want to experience. But first, Glass Reflection would like to thank the sponsor for the video today, being the good people over at Surfshark VPN. A VPN is a way for you to help protect your privacy and what you view online as you surf and watch anime and videos on the web. Not only does it secure your data, encrypting it to help stop people from eavesdropping on your connection, but it also allows you to mask your location. Doing so allows you to bypass the region locking of a variety of streaming services, as not all streaming services are equal in what regions they service. So having a VPN like Surfshark can help you access shows that you may not be able to otherwise. Content blocked on services such as Netflix, YouTube, and elsewhere can be accessible simply by connecting to a server from the country that you would like to access. And of course, Surfshark is available on a variety of devices as well as your PC, so you can stream your anime on the go if you so choose. There'll be a link and a promo code in the description where you can sign up for an extra 3 months free, because we like you guys so much. And best of all, if you try it out and find that it doesn't help, it's not doing what you expected, or it doesn't end up unblocking the content that you want it to, Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, no questions asked. So thank you very much to Surfshark for sponsoring. Now, that story, that anime that I was watching, was Ascendance of a Bookworm. It's a series that I first heard about when its anime began airing in late 2019. It's ostensibly an isekai about a Japanese woman getting reborn as a 5-year-old commoner in a fantasy medieval society, and follows her story that begins with her attempting to make books out of the very little materials that are available to her, since, she is a commoner now, she is poor, and the literacy rate of those around her is basically zero. Bookworm's anime had 3 seasonal cours totaling 36 episodes with 2 OVA episodes, which in all honesty is extremely respectable. But considering the amount of shows that only get like 12 or 13 episodes nowadays, yeah, that's pretty good. But at the end of those 36 episodes, I found myself wanting more. The story was evolving beyond our main character just wanting to make books. She had relationships with interesting characters. She got embroiled in local politics at the religious temple, and even got thrown through a kidnapping plot because of her knowledge and mana capacity. But I asked the question, well, how much more could there possibly be? A lot, as I found out. The anime for Bookworm, again, took 36 episodes, and those episodes covered the content provided from 7 light novels. Not even extremely well, in fact, as I found out later that around 4 of those 7 were just kind of glossed over. But it's still a lot of content for the anime to cover, until you realize that the light novel only just recently released Volume 32. Yeah. So the anime barely covers, 20% of this story right now? So what was I to do? Well, since Bookworm is a series about a character who wants to read books, I proceeded to do the only logical thing that I could. I read the books, but not all the books are translated yet. And, I am slowly becoming obsessed. I tear through these books, spending several weeks of my free time reading and sometimes rereading a bunch of them, such as the nature of Kazuki-sensei's excellent foreshadowing and world building, as even a reread is heavily enjoyable because you get to see how something was alluded to sometimes volumes in advance. And eventually I made it to volume 24, or more specifically part 5, volume 3, as the light novel was split into parts based on their arcs. That's where I was. Now, the light novel is being translated in English over on J-Novel Club, and to the best of my knowledge, Bookworm actually seems to be getting a kind of special treatment over there. Most releases that I've seen J-Novel handle are not always constant per series. Like, some volumes have weeks or even longer between releases, but as of late, Bookworm has been extremely consistent in releasing approximately 2 newly translated chapters every week, and it is very consistent with that. I can only thank the translator for their absolutely superb service. I am 200% looking forward to reading more every single week for the next year, so shout out to the translator. But not too long ago, while I was finding myself surprisingly content with the weekly schedule, one particular chapter left me on a cliffhanger. One that was the kind that had me lying awake at night thinking about it, and I could not stand it. And I wanted to know what was going to happen next, but how could I possibly do that? And now it is at this point we come to machine translation, or MTL. Now, this has been quite the contentious topic, especially as of late with the rise of ChatGPT and the like. I struggle to use the term AI in this context because I honestly and personally feel that these machine learning algorithms are not AI in the traditional sense. Heck, I even heavily debated putting AI in the title of this video, but the YouTube algorithm would probably love it if I do, so if it's there, now you know why, even if I disagree with that description on what these things are. Now, that said, using computers at home to do your translating for you is not really anything new. I have both seen and used Google Translate in order to translate words and phrases for over a decade now. But that has always been the thing, the main limitation there. Words and phrases. The more you give Google Translate, the less accurate it gets, especially if it doesn't understand, the sentence structure of the language involved, and that's to say nothing about proper, context interpretation. So for my purposes of wanting to take a publicly available web novel and translate it into English, Google Translate is terrible. I don't recommend it. Okay then, so what's next? Well, DeepL is a language learning model touted as the world's most accurate translator, which is a bold claim if I've ever heard one, but it has its limitations. Unless you want to pay for it, its free translation covers only 5,000 words, and looking into how many chapters of the web novel that I wanted to translate, and knowing that that was in the range of several 100,000 words, that would not work for my purposes. Now, I could have, of course, paid for it, but I was in the experimental phase of my research and was not really keen on paying for a translation service, only to later find out that it didn't do what I wanted, and I was left with no story and even less money than I was before. To be clear, I am not averse to using money to get what I want here. I am already paying for J-Novel's subscription service because I know that it is worth it. I know what I am getting, and I am fully willing to pay that price. But if what I am getting becomes a big old question mark, well then I would rather continue my research and find another option. So that is what I did. The next logical option, of course, would be ChatGPT. It has limitations in how much you can send at a time, so every chapter would have to be, copy and pasted over in chunks, which causes interesting issues, but they can be mitigated to a point, and after all, I know many people look at ChatGPT as some kind of magic, so I'm sure I could make it work. And here's how it went. If you paste the text in directly and just say, translate this, well, it sort of works, and it is honestly leagues better than the other free alternatives, like, say, Google. In fact, it was readable, and in most cases even understandable. But sometimes I found that ChatGPT had a very hard time determining who was speaking and using proper pronouns accordingly. Not only that, but the more unique words like character names, places, and fantasy objects that have no real-world equivalent were largely hit or miss. I did attempt to fix some of that, specifically by giving ChatGPT a prompt to tell it to keep tenses in mind, to stick to a first-person perspective, and I even gave it a list of proper translations of a number of unique words, which it promptly ignored when inconvenient. No, seriously, I gave it a list. I said, this word in Japanese is a name. Here's how you translate it. And it ignored me. Not only that, but as I had to punch things in a little bit at a time, it would occasionally forget that I was asking it to translate things at all and would just spit Japanese back at me. Needless to say, for that part at least, I was not impressed. But at the end of the day, it was free, it was legible, and I got what I paid for. Do I regret translating and reading the rest of A Sentence of a Bookworm this way? Not at all. There are plenty of flaws in the translation that I read, and honestly, comparing it to the official translation, well, there is no comparison there. The official is just that much better. There are things that I love with how the story was translated in the official books and how it is presented. And I can't get a lot of that from the web novel's MTL. There are many times, like the protagonist of the story, Mine, she talks to herself about events that occur. And while those inner thoughts do exist within the MTL, her voice is just so different from the official version. She doesn't speak the same way because that is also part of the translation, and the MTL just can't gather that uniqueness from the original text. It cannot sub in slang or informal speech that does not directly come from the original. It just can't interpret it that way. So when reading, it feels like a bunch of the narrative soul is missing. Yes, now I know how the story ends. I know what happens to a bunch of the characters, at least most of them. Others are trapped in spin-off land and will apparently stay there until the light novel is completed. But with all of that, at the end of the day, I cannot say that I did not enjoy my experience, which made it all the more frustrating during nail-biting moments of the story when ChatGPT just forgot what we were doing. Multiple times. A character may be dying, and ChatGPT may be like, oh, I'm sorry, you wanted that in English? I thought you wanted me to rephrase everything in kanji. While also, ignoring the examples that you gave me, because of course that's what I wanted it to do. At this exact moment, as I sit here, I do not believe with the tech as it is that official translators will be or should be replaced. And honestly, having read through a bunch of other MTLs at this point, there is just something about them that lacks the soul compared to human translations. They are still readable and they can be enjoyable, but if I had to choose between them, I would still take a human translator in a heartbeat. Shout out once again to the translator for Bookworm. So if you are watching an anime or reading a light novel and get blue-balled by a cliffhanger in content and decide to take a gander at translating a publicly available web novel, I mean, it is functional and it can work for you, but you have to know what you are getting yourself into and what you will miss. Do I recommend it? For most people, nah, not really. But for some, it only needs to be for a series that you are just so desperately infatuated with that you are able to overlook so many of the flaws that you are going to inevitably experience. If you can do that, then this option is certainly available to you. And I wish you well. I'm sure someone in the comments will lambaste me and say that, of course, eventually a new model will become available and it will translate things better and faster. And that may be true. But I feel like there is still one advantage, in the case of Bookworm, for example, that the MTL will never have. The MTL will never be able to talk to the author and clarify things, which means that it'll always get something wrong. But then again, Crunchyroll went ahead and subtitled the Bookworm's main character as Main in the anime, when the light novel calls her Mine, with a Y. So it's not like human translators are perfect all the time. Anyway. Or maybe that's just Crunchyroll. And with that, we have reached the end of the video. I did want to give quick thanks and a shout out to supporters of this channel over on Patreon. While this video may be sponsored, the more support that we get over there, the less sponsorships that Glass Reflection will need at any given time. So an immense thank you to all of you, especially to patrons like Rifen Bonaparte, Ross Emerson, Omar Showman, Sailor Arashi, Hector Montemayor, Wago221, and City Yamako for being especially awesome. So until next time, subscribe if you haven't, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and of course, watch more anime and stay frosty.